Have you ever looked at the world map and just wondered, why do some countries seem to, well, thrive, build vibrant economies, endless opportunities?
While others just seem stuck, trapped in these cycles of poverty and instability.
Exactly. What really causes that huge difference? What's the secret sauce?
It's a massive question.
It really is. And today, we're diving into a book that tries to answer it head on. You are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation powered by Google's NotebookLM for deeper, more dynamic book critique.
The book is Why Nations Fail: The Origins of Power, Prosperity, and Poverty.
Right, by Daron Acemoglu and James A. Robinson. And these aren't just any authors. They both got the 2024 Nobel Prize in economics.
Yeah, so serious heavyweights in the field. Their ideas carry a lot of weight.
And their core argument, it really challenges a lot of the old explanations.
It does. They basically say, look, it's not mainly about geography. It's not culture. It's not even about having smart leaders, necessarily.
So what is it about then?
It boils down to institutions, political and economic institutions. Specifically, are they inclusive, letting everyone participate, or extractive, designed to take wealth from the many for the few?
Inclusive versus extractive. That's the core distinction they make.
That's the heart of it.
In this book, it's not just straight economics, is it? It feels broader.
Oh, definitely. It sits right at that crossroads of political economy, comparative development. History, too.
Yeah.
It's ambitious.
It came out in 2012, right? Which was pretty interesting timing.
Perfect timing, really. Right after the global financial crisis, the Arab Spring was unfolding, people were seriously questioning the old models of development.
And this book, based on 15 years of their research, kind of landed right in the middle of that questioning. Institutional economics was gaining ground.
Precisely. So our mission today is to really get into this book, not just summarize it, but properly critique it.
We're going to dissect the claims, look hard at the evidence they use,
And explore the counterarguments, the critiques, the places where the framework might, fall short.
we want you, listening, to get a really thorough sense of its impact, but also its limitations.
Okay, so let's unpack the book's core claims first. What are the big pillars?
Well, number one, as you said, inclusive institutions drive prosperity, extractive ones lead to poverty. That's the bedrock.
Right. Inclusive means secure property rights, fair legal systems, opportunities for most people to get involved economically and politically. Think open playing field.
And extractive.
Basically the opposite. Rigged systems. Power concentrated, wealth funneled upwards. Little incentive for ordinary people to innovate or invest because they know the rewards will just be taken.
Got it. Then claim number two. Political institutions are the real foundation. They shape the economic ones.
Exactly. Who holds political power? And are there checks on that power? That determines whether the economic rules are fair or rigged. Politics comes first, in their view.
It dictates the economic game.
Pretty much.
And claim three is where they really challenge the older ideas. They argue geography and culture just aren't enough to explain the huge differences we see.
Yeah, that's a direct shot at theories like, Montesquieu or even Jared Diamond to some extent. They say those factors don't determine destiny.
Okay, so those are the big claims. How do they back this up? What's the evidence?
Well, what's fascinating here is how the book supports these claims with compelling examples. Really stark comparisons.
Like North and South Korea, that one seems impossible to ignore.
It's their poster child, almost. Same people, same geography, same history, up to 1945. Then drastically different institutions are imposed.
And you get the outcomes we see today. One struggling, one a global economic player.
It's a powerful illustration of their point. Then they look at colonial legacies.
How the type of colonization influenced the institutions left behind.
Exactly. Places where Europeans settled in large numbers tended to replicate more inclusive institutions from home. Places focused purely on resource extraction. They got extractive states designed for that purpose, and those often persisted after independence.
A historical echo, shaping things even now.
Right. And they point to England's Glorious Revolution in 1688.
How does that fit in?
They argue it was a crucial shift towards more inclusive political institutions strengthening Parliament against the Crown. And that, they say, laid the groundwork for more inclusive economic institutions, paving the way for the Industrial Revolution.
So a political change unlocking economic potential.
That's the narrative. It connects to their idea of critical junctures.
Those moments in history where things could go one way or another.
Yeah, small differences or specific events at a critical point can send countries down vastly different long-term institutional paths. Contingency matters.
Okay. What other examples really stand out?
Nogales, the city split by the U.S.-Mexico border.
Right. Nogales, Arizona versus Nogales, Sonora. Same location, same culture originally.
But walk across the street and life expectancy, income, public services, they're drastically different. Why? The book says different national institutions on either side of that line.
It's hard to argue with that visual, that direct comparison.
It's very effective. And finally, they talk about the reversal of fortune. This is the observation that many areas that were relatively rich and densely populated before European colonization think the Moguls in India or the Aztecs and Incas became relatively poor afterwards.
While some sparsely populated areas like North America or Australia became rich.
Exactly. They argue this reversal is hard to explain with just geography or culture because those didn't flip. What changed? The institutions imposed during colonization. Extractive ones in the formerly rich places, more inclusive ones where Europeans settled.
Okay, so the evidence seems pretty robust for these core ideas, quite compelling examples. But here's where it gets really interesting when we start to look at some of the nuances and critiques.
Right, this raises an important question. How well does the framework truly hold up under closer scrutiny? Does it always fit the real world?
My first thought is, isn't inclusive versus extractive a bit too black and white, a massive oversimplification?
That's a very common critique, and a fair one, I think. It's an opinion-level assessment. Most real-world institutions are messy, right? They're a mix.
Yeah, you might have, say, strong property rights in one area, but a really corrupt political system, or vice versa. Where does that fit?
Exactly. Think about China, which we'll come back to. Highly extractive political system by their definition, yet decades of incredible growth. Or even historically, many Western nations had periods of expansion that were pretty extractive towards others, even while building inclusive institutions at home. The binary struggles of that complexity.
So, useful as a concept, maybe, but reality is shades of gray.
It often is. However, on a knowledge level, you have to give them credit. The broad correlation they point to between, say, democratic institutions and economic growth, or secure property rights and investment, that empirical link is strong.
The basic data often supports the trend.
Yes. And the historical data they use, like on the colonial patterns or the Glorious Revolutions effects, while open to interpretation, provides a solid factual foundation for debate.
And at the understanding level, their big achievement is synthesis, right? Pulling together economics, politics, history.
Absolutely. They built a powerful narrative that helps us understand why institutions tend to persist, why reforms often fail if the underlying political structure isn't addressed. It helps explain why just copying policies from one country doesn't guarantee success elsewhere. The institutional context matters hugely.
That ability to connect the dots across disciplines is definitely impressive. But, shifting gears a bit, beyond the data and the theory, the book's framework also makes you think about the ethical side of things, especially if you try that role reversal thought experiment.
Yeah. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this perspective brings up critical ethical asymmetries, as some critics point out.
What do you mean by that?
Well, critique number one. The framework tends to hold up Western institutions as the ideal, the inclusive model, but it doesn't always fully grapple with how those Western institutions coexisted with and often depended on deeply extractive relationships with colonies.
So the wealth that helped build inclusive systems at home was partly extracted from elsewhere.
Right. So the ethical question becomes, would Western nations, if the roles were reversed today, readily accept the same advice, just adopt our institutions, without acknowledging that historical context? It feels a bit like ignoring part of the story.
That's a really uncomfortable but important point. What's the second asymmetry?
It's about external constraints. The theory focuses heavily on internal institutions within a nation, but critics argue it downplays how external factors imposed by powerful nations can severely limit a developing country's choices.
Things like?
Like historical debt burdens, unfair trade rules, sanctions, political interference, the legacy of structural adjustment programs. These things can make it incredibly hard for a country to build any kind of effective institution, inclusive or otherwise.
So the message becomes, fix your internal institutions while ignoring the external straitjacket.
That's the critique, and again, the reciprocity test. Would wealthy nations tolerate those kinds of external constraints while being told the problem's all internal? Probably not.
It feels like it violates the golden rule, almost. Asking others to do something you wouldn't accept yourself.
Some argue it fails that reciprocity standard. The book recommends adopting institutions that took the West centuries, plus often exploitative advantages, to develop. It asks developing nations to do it faster, with fewer resources, and often while facing external headwinds.
That context is crucial. And, wrestling with these complex ethical dimensions, trying to see things from multiple perspectives, it's tough, but so important. For anyone looking for tools to help with that kind of critical thinking, remember to check out Mindful Moments on our YouTube channel. We use AI for book analysis, summaries, critiques, really aimed at sparking reflection and rational thought. It's about processing these big ideas.
Definitely worth checking out. Now, another interesting way the book has been critiqued is by evaluating it against a set of fundamental societal goals, almost like the preamble to the U.S. Constitution.
Like, how well does the theory help achieve things like justice, unity, welfare, liberty?
Exactly. It's a fascinating lens. It scores pretty well overall, about 14 out of a possible 18 stars in one analysis. But the breakdown shows where its strengths and weaknesses lie.
Okay, where does it shine?
It gets full marks, 3 stars for establish justice, promote general welfare, and secure blessings of liberty. That makes sense, right? The whole theory is built around property rights, rule of law, economic opportunity, and the political freedoms that underpin inclusive systems.
That's its core focus. Where is it weaker?
It only gets 1 star for provide for common defense, national security, external threats, how those shape institutions. That's really not a major focus of the book.
A significant blind spot, maybe?
Potentially. And it gets 2 stars for form a more perfect union and ensure domestic tranquility. It identifies how bad institutions cause conflict and division, but
it doesn't offer much on how to actually build unity or manage transitions peacefully, especially when things are polarized.
exactly. It diagnoses the problem of division caused by extractive institutions, but is less clear on the cure, particularly in already divided societies. And it doesn't fully tackle how inequality, even within supposedly inclusive societies, can threaten that unity.
That preamble test is a really insightful way to map the theory's focus.
Okay.
Okay, beyond ethics and goals, what about basic logical challenges? Does the argument hold up structurally?
Well, like many grand theories, it faces some classic potential pitfalls. This is where critical thinking about the argument itself comes in.
Such as?
One major one is the risk of circular reasoning, or tautology.
How so?
Well, think about how inclusive institutions are defined. They're largely defined by the characteristics already found in prosperous, stable Western countries: strong property rights, rule of law, democracy, etc.
Okay.
So the argument can sound like countries are prosperous because they have inclusive institutions. And what are inclusive institutions? They're the kind of institutions prosperous countries have.
It defines the cause by the effect, almost. Prosperous countries have X, therefore X causes prosperity.
It can feel a bit like that. It makes the correlation strong, almost by definition, but raises questions about genuine causation. Is it just the institutions, or are the institutions themselves a result of some deeper factors that also drive prosperity?
Right, the chicken and egg problem again. What else?
Selection bias. The book leans heavily on certain success stories that fit the model well. England, the U.S., Botswana, maybe.
And gives less attention to cases that don't fit neatly.
Arguably, yes. Failed transitions, countries that tried reforms and didn't succeed, or mixed cases get less systematic focus. And the big one, China. Decades of massive growth under politically extracted institutions. The book touches on it, suggesting it's unsustainable, but doesn't fully integrate that major counterexample into the core framework.
That feels like a significant omission, or at least an underexplored area.
It's a major point of debate. Then there's the false dichotomy issue we already mentioned. The rigid inclusive extractive split doesn't capture the messy middle ground where most countries actually exist.
Reality is more of a spectrum.
Almost always. And related to that is post hoc reasoning. Sometimes the historical analysis seems to assume that because B followed A must have caused B.
Just because the Glorious Revolution happened before the Industrial Revolution doesn't automatically mean one solely caused the other, without ruling out other factors.
Precisely. Correlation isn't causation. You have to be careful not to just tell a convenient story looking backwards. Other things were happening too. Technological changes, shifts in trade, demography.
It's complex.
Very. And all this loops back to that fundamental endogeneity problem.
Right.
If institutions cause prosperity, what causes good institutions? The theory is much better at explaining why bad institutions persist than explaining how good ones initially emerge. It struggles with the ultimate origins.
That feels like the million-dollar question they don't fully answer.
It's the question many critics keep coming back to.
Okay, so taking a step back from the theory itself, What are the real-world consequences of thinking this way? And does the book give us practical tools?
Yeah, knowledge is great, but how usable is it? What happens when this framework influences policy or thinking?
Right. What are the potential long-term social consequences?
Well, on the one hand, focusing on institutions is good. But the framework could encourage overly rapid, externally pushed reforms based on Western models, without enough thought for local context, cultural fit, or transition costs. That could be destabilizing.
Trying to transplant institutions wholesale might not work or could even backfire.
It might undermine existing, maybe imperfect but functional, local ways of governing. There's a risk of losing valuable indigenous knowledge or social cohesion.
Okay, and economic consequences.
The focus on getting institutions right is valid for long-term growth. But critics argue it might oversimplify things in the shorter term. It could downplay the potential role for things like smart industrial policy, strategic state intervention, or managing global trade integration tools many successful East Asian economies used, for example, even without perfectly inclusive politics initially.
So it might offer too narrow a recipe for economic development.
It might. And culturally or spiritually, the framework is quite materialistic, focused on prosperity and power. It doesn't have much room for societies organized around different values, maybe community, tradition, spirituality.
Promoting a universal Western institutional model could indirectly erode that cultural diversity.
That's a concern some raise, a loss of different forms of social wisdom.
Which brings us back to that practical wisdom deficit you mentioned.
Yeah. For a book based on 15 years of research, diagnosing the problem so powerfully, it offers surprisingly little concrete advice on how society actually makes the transition from extractive to inclusive.
It tells you what you need, but not how to build it, especially if you're starting from a really tough place.
Exactly. It can generate hope, but maybe also unrealistic expectations about the ease and speed of fundamental institutional change. It's like identifying the destination but not providing a reliable map or vehicle.
Okay, so after this really deep dive into the critique, let's try to synthesize. What are the absolute key strengths and weaknesses we should take away?
All right, summing up. Key strengths. First, it powerfully challenges geographic and cultural determinism. That's a huge contribution.
Opened up the debate.
Absolutely. Second, it gives us a coherent, compelling framework for understanding institutional persistence, why change is often so hard. Third, the synthesis across disciplines, history, politics, economics is masterful.
Fourth,
it correctly identifies the critical role of political institutions in shaping economic outcomes. And fifth, the use of those stark historical comparisons, Korea, Nogales, makes the arguments incredibly memorable and intuitively appealing.
Okay, those are strong positives. Now the flip side, the key weaknesses.
1. That binary inclusive extractive classification. It oversimplifies messy reality. 2. Limited practical guidance on how to achieve reform.
Diagnosis without a clear prescription.
Pretty much. 3. Struggles to explain important contemporary cases convincingly, especially China. 4. It tends to minimize the impact of external constraints and global power dynamics.
The international context gets short shrift.
Arguably. 5. A perceived Western bias in the institutional models it champions. And 6. That persistent endogeneity problem, the struggle to explain the origins of good institutions.
So it leaves us, the listeners, with some big unresolved questions to chew on.
Definitely. Questions like, how can societies realistically, practically transition from extractive to inclusive? What really explains institutional equality if institutions explain prosperity? Is there a deeper cause?
How should we understand successful growth under authoritarian regimes? Does the model need adapting?
What role do specific cultural values play in making institutions effective in particular contexts? Are universal models always best?
And how much do international power structures, trade rules, debt, how much do they really limit the choices of developing nations, regardless of their leaders' intentions?
These are the kinds of questions the book raises, even if it doesn't fully answer them all.
So, for those of you looking to go even deeper into this incredibly complex and important topic, Why Nations Fail is a fantastic starting point, but it's crucial to read it in conversation with other perspectives. Don't stop here.
Absolutely. Knowledge is always richer when you consider multiple viewpoints. There are many other insightful authors and frameworks offering different lenses, different explanations.
What should people look at for alternative perspectives? Maybe start with those who emphasize factors the book downplays.
Good idea. For geography and environment, there's obviously Jared Diamond's Guns, Germs, and Steel. For a focus on geographic poverty traps and the role of aid, Jeffrey Sachs's The End of Poverty.
And for the role of the state and industrial policy.
Definitely Ha-Joon Chang's Bad Samaritans. He argues rich countries basically kicked away the ladder they used to climb up. Also Eric Reinert's How Rich Countries Got Rich and Why Poor Countries Stay Poor, which stresses technology and strategic trade.
Are there direct critiques of why nations fail people can read?
Oh yes, scholars like Gareth Austin have critiqued its application to Africa. Duncan Green at Oxfam wrote a well-known review highlighting the Western bias and lack of practical guidance. Plus, numerous academic journals and debates have responses. A quick search will find plenty.
What about other theoretical frameworks entirely?
You could look at Elinor Ostrom's Nobel-winning work on how communities manage common resources, a different take on governance. Albert Hirschman's writings on development strategy and local knowledge are classics. Or James C. Scott's critiques of top-down development schemes, like in Seeing Like a State.
So lots of different angles. Any more contemporary takes?
Mark Zachary Taylor's The Politics of Innovation offers an alternative theory focusing on how nations respond to external threats versus internal conflict. And specific regional critiques exist, like Esteban Perez Caldente's Why Latin American Nations Fail, which uses an institutionalist lens but emphasizes demand-led growth differently.
Wow, okay, that's a great reading list for anyone wanting the full 360-degree view.
The bottom line is, the framework from Acemoglu and Robinson in Why Nations Fail offers incredibly valuable insights. It changed the conversation. But as we've seen, reading it alongside these other perspectives is crucial for developing a truly comprehensive understanding of why some nations prosper and others struggle. It's just too complex for one single explanation.
Absolutely. This deep dive critique really underscores that. While a powerful theory like this gives us invaluable tools for thinking, the reality of development is always messier, more complex, and context-dependent. Understanding these debates, thinking critically about grand narratives, and appreciating the huge challenges of institutional change that can really shape how you view global events and policies. Don't forget to check out Mindful Moments and our other podcasts on our YouTube channel for more AI-powered book analysis and critiques. Click the link on screen for the in-depth book analysis. Subscribe, share, purchase via link, and think rationally.